The air smelled of smoke and frost. It was late October in ancient Ireland, the kind of night when mist rolls over the hills like a living thing. The harvest is done, the fields are bare, and silence hangs heavy in the air. But this silence isn't peace. It's anticipation. Every flicker of torchlight, every rustle of leaves, seems to whisper that the boundaries between worlds are shifting. This is Samhain, the night when the Celts believed the veil between the living and the dead grew thin. A night of endings and beginnings, when the year itself was said to die and be reborn. To them, this wasn't merely a date on a calendar. It was a sacred threshold, a time outside of time. Imagine standing on one of the high hills of Ireland over 2,000 years ago. Below, in the dark valleys, small fires begin to appear, one after another, until the land glows with orange light. Families gather close, wrapping wool cloaks around their shoulders. Cattle are driven into pens. Crops are stored. Every household waits for the Druids. Signal the lighting of the great fire, the flame that marks the death of the old year and the birth of the new. When that sacred fire blazes on the hill, everyone feels it in their bones. Summer has truly died. The last green leaves have fallen, and the world now turns toward darkness. But for the Celts, darkness was not something to fear. It was necessary. A time of rest, renewal, and reflection. Life and death were two halves of the same circle, forever feeding each other. And yet, Samhain carried a thrill of danger. On this night, the spirits of the departed were free to walk the earth once more. Ancestors might visit their homes, drawn by the warmth of the hearth. But other beings, tricksters, fairies, and darker entities also roamed freely, to invite the friendly ones and keep the others away. People left out offerings, bowls of food, beads of bread and candles burning by the window. Every household hearth was extinguished before midnight, plunging the land into total darkness. Only after the Druids. Ritual fire burned would families relight their own, symbolizing unity with the tribe and the turning of the wheel. The new flames carried protection, hope, and continuity into the long winter ahead. The children would listen to stories of the ALSC, the fae folk who lived beneath the hills, of ghostly processions that crossed the land, of travelers who wandered too far that night and never returned. The elders would tell of heroes and gods, of the great battles fought when the veil grew thin and fate itself hung in the balance. But perhaps the most powerful part of Samhain wasn't the fear of what might come through the veil. It was the reminder that everything we love is temporary, and that even endings carry seeds of renewal. The Celts understood what we often forget, that death and life are partners in the same eternal dance. As the last embers of the bonfire glow against the cold wind, someone whispers an ancient blessing into the dark. May the old year die well, and may the new one rise bright. Little do they know that thousands of years later, long after the Druids have vanished and the hills have changed names, the essence of this night, the fear, the wonder, the honoring of the unseen, will still live on. Only then, it will be called something different. Halloween. Halloween. The Celts did not see time as a straight line. For them, it moved in a circle, an eternal wheel turning through the seasons. Each spoke representing a sacred festival that mirrored the pulse of the earth itself. Birth, growth, harvest, decay. These weren't random moments. They were the heartbeat of life, and at the heart of that rhythm was Samhain, the moment when one world ended and another began. The Celtic year was divided into 8 festivals, but 4 stood above all: Imbolc, Beltane, Lugnasad, and Samhain. Each marked a turning point, a meeting of opposites. Imbolc came in early February, when lambs were born and snow began to soften, symbolizing purity and awakening. Beltane, in May, was fire and fertility, when lovers leaped over flames and celebrated the return of abundance. Lugnasad, in August, honored the first harvest, a time of gratitude and hard work. But Samhain, at the end of October, was different. It wasn't just another festival. It was the great divider, the line between life and death, light and dark, the old and the new. While modern calendars began the year in the cold silence of January, the Celts began theirs in darkness. To them, all life was born from shadow. Just as a seed sprouts from the dark earth and a child grows in the womb, the new year emerged from the night of Samhain. On this night, the sun was dying, the light fading earlier each day. Winter loomed unpredictable and unforgiving. Food was scarce, till and bare and storms restless. And yet, amidst this decay, the Celts found meaning. Samhain reminded them that death is part of life's design, not an ending to be feared, but a necessary rest before renewal. It was the season of thresholds. The crops that once grew tall now fed the people. The animals that roamed the fields were brought close to the hearth. The fires that once blazed for joy were now lit for warmth. Every act, gathering, storing, lighting was ritual. Nothing was mundane. At the sacred sites, places like Terra, Uzanish, and the Hill of Ward, great ceremonies unfolded. The Druids, the spiritual keepers of the Celtic world, stood beneath star-streaked skies, chanting prayers to guide the tribe safely through the darkness. They believed the gods walked among them that night, testing, teaching, and reminding mortals of the unseen forces that ruled all things. One ancient text, the Tokmar Mir, even hints that warriors were forbidden to fight during Samhain, because chaos ruled and no man could know if his enemy was human or something older. The night itself belonged to mystery, but Samhain wasn't all fear. It was also gratitude. It was the final harvest, the last chance to share food, laughter, and stories before the isolation of winter. Villages held great feasts, tables laden with barley bread, roasted meat, and apples, the fruit of immortality in Celtic myth. They toasted the living and the dead alike, believing that their ancestors' spirits sat among them, invisible but near. The Celtic Wheel of the Year wasn't just a calendar. It was a spiritual map, one that guided people to live in harmony with nature's rhythms. Samhain stood as both an ending and a beginning, a doorway between what has been and what is yet to come. In the silence after the feast, when the fire crackled low, people would step outside and look up at the black sky, endless, vast, and full of stars. Somewhere between the earth and the heavens, between what was and what will be, they sensed something sacred. The world felt thinner, and perhaps in that stillness they understood a truth that would echo through ages, that life moves not forward but in circles, and that every ending, no matter how dark, is simply the beginning of another turn of the wheel. As the last light of autumn fades, the world begins to feel different. The air sharpens, the nights stretch long, and something invisible seems to hum beneath the surface of the earth. To the ancient Celts, this wasn't imagination. It was presence. Samhain marked the time when the barrier between the seen and unseen grew thin, when the living could sense the breath of the dead and the spirits could whisper through the wind. They believed the universe was layered. Our world of flesh and soil was only one realm among many. Beyond it lay the other world, a place of endless twilight where ancestors, gods, and spirits dwelled. Most of the year, that boundary was firm. But on the night of Samhain, it dissolved like mist. The two worlds brushed against each other, and the air shimmered with both danger and possibility. The Celts didn't think of death as something separate or final. To them, it was a doorway, not an abyss, but a passage. When a person died, their spirit simply crossed into another state of being. Samhain was the moment those two states touched. It was a night of return. The dead could visit their homes once more, drawn by the warmth of the fire and the love of those still living. Families would set an extra place at the table, or leave food and drink by the door, in case an ancestor wandered close. A candle in the window guided them home through the dark, but not all who crossed the veil were kind. The Celts spoke of the Eos Suzafai folk who lived beneath the hollow hills, powerful and unpredictable. They could bless or curse, mislead travelers, or steal unwary souls. On Samhain night, the Eoases were free to roam, their ancient mounds glowing faintly under the moon. People avoided certain paths, fearing to disturb them. Offerings of milk, bread, or honey were left at crossroads and on stone altars to appease them. Stories tell of mortals who vanished on Samhain, spirited away by these beings. One legend speaks of a man who followed strange music into a circle of lights, only to wake a century later, unchanged, while the world around him had aged and forgotten his name. These tales weren't meant to frighten children. They were reminders that reality was fragile, that another realm posed just beyond sight. The Druids wise in ritual and mystery, used Samhain as a night of divination. They watched the flames of sacred fires, the flight of birds, or the patterns left by ashes to foresee what the coming year would bring. Lovers might peel apples and toss the skins over their shoulders, hoping to see the shape of a future spouse's initial. Farmers asked the spirits for guidance. Would the winter be harsh or merciful? In the heart of the dark season, prophecy felt closer to truth. Every act carried meaning. A gust of wind could be a message from a departed friend. A shadow passing by the door might be a grandmother checking in. Fear and comfort mingled in equal measure, for Samhain reminded everyone that death was not an absence, but a continuation. The loved ones gone from sight was still near, just across the veil. To stand outside on Samhain night was to feel the edge of two worlds pressing together. The stars shone brighter, the silence deeper. The earth itself seemed to breathe. Some said the gods used this night to walk among men, testing courage and faith. Others believed it was a time to release what no longer served grief, regret, old wounds, letting them drift away with a dying year. Samhain was never meant to be a night of despair. It was a time of reverence, of recognizing the full circle of existence. The Celts knew that the same forces that brought death also made rebirth possible. Without decay, there could be no growth. Without night, no dawn. So they honored both sides, the living and the dead, the seen and the unseen, the joy of life and the inevitability of loss. Around their fires, they told stories of transformation and renewal, of heroes who entered the other world and returned wiser. The myths served as maps for the soul, teaching that courage was found not by avoiding darkness, but by walking through it. As the fire crackled and the mist thickened, perhaps someone looked into the flames and felt, for a fleeting moment, that they were being watched, not with malice, but with recognition. A reminder from beyond that the circle never truly breaks. For one night each year, the Celts stepped into the space between worlds. They didn't run from it. They welcomed it. In their acceptance of mystery lay their greatest wisdom, that what separates life from death is thinner than a breath, and that to live fully, one must honor both. The world has gone quiet. The sun sets early, sinking behind the bare hills, and the wind carries the sharp scent of peat and smoke. In every valley and settlement across the Celtic lands, preparations for Samhain begin. It is the most sacred night of the year, a night of fire, of endings, and of glimpsing what lies beyond the veil. Before the first flame is lit, the entire land falls into darkness. Every hearth, every torch, every candle is extinguished. The people stand in silence beneath the stars, their breath misting in the cold air. It is said that in that moment, the world holds its breath to caught between what was and what will be. The year has died. The fire must be reborn. On the hills above, the druids begin their solemn work. Clad in white robes, they gather around great piles of wood, chanting in the ancient tongue. The air thrums with anticipation. When the sacred fire roars to life, its glow spills across the land, a beacon against the dark. From this single blaze, torches are lit and carried to every home, rekindling the hearths that will burn through the long winter. It is not just fire they carry, but renewal, the promise of warmth, unity, and survival. The people believe the fire protects them. As spars rise toward the sky, prayers follow for health, for strong cattle, for peace among tribes. The Celts did not pray in words alone. Their prayers were alive, smoke, breath, motion. Everything they did was part of the ritual. Samhain was also a night of offerings. To honor the gods and appease the wandering spirits, people left gifts of food and drink outside their doors. Platters of meat, slices of bread, apples, and honey were arranged with care. Some were meant for ancestors returning home, others for the AOSCs, the mysterious VI, who walked the land unseen. Ignoring these beings was risky. They could sour milk, bring sickness, or lead travelers astray. But kindness kept them at bay. Feasting was at the heart of Samhain. After the rituals, the people gathered in large halls or around open fires, sharing what was left of the harvest. Barley bread baked in stone ovens, roasted boar, buttered turnips, and stewed apples filled the air with warmth and scent. Everyone ate their fill, knowing leaner days were ahead. Between laughter and song, the elders told stories of old heroes, Cuchulainn, Finn MacTool, and the goddess Morrígan Telis, of glory and fate that bound the tribe together. And when the food was gone, the games began. Divination was a central part of Samhain, for this was a night when truth hid in plain sight. The druids, skilled in prophecy, read omens in the fire's shape or the ashes' fall. Ordinary folk found simpler ways. Young women dropped apple peels over their shoulders to reveal the initials of their future husbands. Others gazed into bowls of water or polished metal, hoping to see visions of the year to come. Pears threw hazelnuts into the fire. If the nuts burned together, love would last. If they burst apart, the bond would break. It wasn't all lighthearted. Some rituals were deadly serious. In the oldest traditions, animals were sacrificed to ensure abundance and protection. Cattle, the most precious of possessions, were driven between twin fires to cleanse them of evil before the long, dangerous winter. The smoke was sacred, a shield woven from earth and spirit. The druids believed Samhain was the night when communication between worlds was easiest. They sought messages from gods and ancestors alike. The future of kings, the fate of wars, even the turning of the seasons could be glimpsed through ritual and trance. Some legends say druids drank from sacred springs or chewed leaves of the yew tree to open their minds to visions. In the flickering firelight, truth danced just beyond reason's reach. Masks and disguises were also part of Samhain. People wore animal skins or painted faces to confuse malicious spirits, blending in with the dead who wandered that night. The Celts called disguising a custom that would echo through centuries and eventually become the Halloween costumes we know today. Behind every mask laid the same ancient instinct to honor fear, not to flee from it. Samhain was also a night of storytelling. Around the fire, the Old Ones spoke of the other world, a land not of torment, but of endless twilight, beauty, and danger. Time flowed differently there. A single night spent among the fair folk could mean 100 years had passed in the mortal world. Listeners huddled close, the fire casting their shadows long against the stones, as they imagined heroes crossing misty rivers into lands where death and dream were one. When the feasting and the songs were over, the night belonged to silence again. Some families kept watch by the hearth, listening for the creak of a floorboard or the sigh of the wind signs that a loved one's spirit had come to visit. Others stepped outside, faces lit by the moon, and whispered names into the cold air. It was said that if the departed answered, you would feel it a soft warmth, a shiver, or the sudden stillness of the night. And so, as the fire faded and the embers glowed low, the people of the Celts slept under the gaze of their gods, wrapped in the rhythm of nature's great wheel. They did not dread the darkness that followed. They welcomed it, for in their hearts, they knew that within every death sleeps a seed of rebirth. Their rituals were more than superstition. They were acts of balance, gestures of gratitude to the world that fed them and took them back in the end. The fires, the food, the stories, the masks, all were ways of saying the same ancient truth, that life and death are bound together and that every ending, no matter how final, carries within it the quiet promise of return. The wind rises over the dark fields of Ireland, carrying a sound that is neither fully human nor entirely natural, the low cry of a raven. To the Celts, that voice was more than a bird's call. It was the whisper of fate itself, carried by the Morrigan, the Phantom Queen, the goddess who ruled over war, death, and prophecy. If Samhain was the night when the veil between worlds thinned, the Morrigan was its spirit made flesh. She was not a goddess of destruction alone, but of transformation, of endings that give birth to beginnings. Her presence was both feared and revered, for she walked the shadowed edge where life and death meet. Legends say she appeared on battlefields, her cloak black as storm clouds, her hair wild as the wind. She did not swing a sword or wield a spear. Her power was subtler. She moved through chaos, unseen, deciding which warriors would live to see another dawn and which would fall. Wherever crows gathered, the Morrigan was near, watching, judging, and weaving the fates of men. But her story was not only of war. She was also the keeper of prophecy, of the cycles that govern the world, love, death, and renewal. In one of the oldest Irish myths, she meets the hero Cuchulainn, a warrior destined for greatness. Disguised as a beautiful woman, She offers him her love and protection before battle. He refuses her, not recognizing the goddess behind the disguise. Enraged, yet sorrowful, the Morrigan vows to test him. She transforms into a wolf, then an eel, then a cow, each time challenging him, each time wounding him, as he fights without understanding who she truly is. Later, when Sichulain lies dying, bleeding beneath a gray sky, the Morrigan appears once more not as an enemy, but as a crow. She lands on his shoulder, silent witness to the fate she foretold. The warrior who defied her meets the end he could not escape. Yet even in that moment, there is no cruelty in her gaze, only inevitability. The cycle is complete. Through stories like these, the Celts came to understand the Morrigan as more than a bringer of death. She was the voice of balance, the dark current that ensures life continues to flow. Her power was not about ending life, but about maintaining the sacred order of things. She reminded humanity that nothing, not even heroes, stands outside the reach of destiny. During Samhain, the Morriganess presence was felt everywhere. The howling wind across the moors was her breath. The circling ravens above the harvest fields were her eyes. As the old year died, she walked the land unseen, whispering to the dying sun, closing one chapter of the world so another could begin. But she was not a goddess of despair. In her darkness lay creation's seed. Just as the earth must lie fallow before spring, just as fire consumes before it gives warmth, the Morriganese domain was the crucible of renewal. Her wisdom was harsh, but it was truth, that growth demands surrender, and that what we fear most is often what sets us free. In the myths, she sometimes joined forces with Badabin Masha, forming a triad of war and fate, three faces of one divine force. Together, they embodied the cycles of youth, maturity, and decay. The Morrigan was the crone, the one who sees beyond the veil. Her eyes held the knowing that life is temporary, but eternal in its rhythm. For the Celts gathered around their Samhain fires, her story was a mirror. They saw in her not just the goddess of battle, but the reflection of their own struggles, the wars within themselves, the losses they carried, the courage it took to face the unknown. When they offered the first bite of their feast to the flames, they honored her, acknowledging that she ruled not just over death, but over transformation. In the Morrigan, the suits found the essence of Samhain itself, the meeting of endings and beginnings, destruction and rebirth, sorrow and wisdom. She was the dark wing that brushed the edge of every life, reminding them that even in loss, there is meaning. As the night deepened and the raven's cries faded into the distance, the people would whisper her name in respect, never in fear, for they knew that without her shadow, there could be no dawn. And when the morning came, pale and cold, it was her unseen hand that turned the wheel once more, carrying the living into the new year. Time changes all things, even the sacred. Centuries passed, empires rose and fell, and the world that once pulsed with the rhythm of the Celtic year began to shift. The Romans came first, building roads across the wild hills, bringing their gods and their festivals with them. Then came Christianity, spreading like new light through old shadows. Yet the Celts, bound to their land and its mysteries, did not easily surrender their ways. Samhain endured, but it began to wear new names. When Christian missionaries reached the Celtic lands around the 5th century, they found a people whose beliefs were woven into every tree, stone, and season. To uproot those traditions entirely was impossible. Instead, the church sought to transform them, to baptize the old world rather than destroy it. What could not be erased was reinterpreted, reshaped, and folded into new rituals. By the 9th century, this transformation had taken form. The church declared November 1st as All Saints' Day, a time to honor holy men and women who had died in faith. The night before October 31st became All Hallows Eve, the eve of the holy ones. It was a clever fusion. The sacred time of the dead remained, but now under a Christian name. The fires of Samhain were still lit, but prayers were said to saints instead of spirits. Yet the old beliefs didn't vanish. They lingered soft as echoes beneath the hymns. The people still felt that the night before All Saints' Day was different, charged, uncertain. The idea of the veil between worlds persisted. Only now, it was described as the souls in purgatory walking the earth, seeking prayers to guide them toward heaven. In villages across Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, Families lit candles in windows to guide not only their ancestors, but also the lost souls who wandered the night. The traditions of offering food continued too, though their meaning shifted. Instead of feeding spirits or fee, people baked soul cakes, small round breads spiced with nutmeg and currants. Children and the poor would go door to door, singing prayers for the dead in exchange for these cakes. Each cake eaten, it was said, freed a soul from suffering. This practice, known as souling, was one of the earliest forms of what would later become trick. The costumes, too, endured. The Celts had once worn animal skins and painted faces to confuse spirits. Now, people began dressing as saints, angels, or the souls of the departed. Yet in the flickering candlelight, the line between holy and haunted blurred. The villagers who masked themselves on All Hallows Eve carried within them the ancient memory of guising, of becoming something else for a single night, when identity itself could bend and twist. Church bells rang to ward off evil, echoing through fog and forest. Bonfires, though renamed holy fires, still burned on the hills. The priests recited psalms, and yet, deep within, the people felt the old power stirring beneath the new words. Samhain had not died. It had only changed its shape. In time, All Souls' Day was added on November 2nd, a day for praying for the ordinary dead, not just the saints. The church calendar now mirrored what the Celts had always believed, a period when the living and the dead drew close, when remembrance bridged the gap between worlds. But in those early medieval nights, fear began to mingle with faith. The new religions spoke of demons and hellfire, and what had once been spirits of nature and ancestors were recast as devils or restless souls. The old gods became villains in sermons. The Morrígan became a witch. The AOSC became tricksters or temptations of the devil. And yet, the people still left offerings on their doorsteps. They still whispered to the night. They still felt something ancient moving in the dark, something too old and vast to name. So Samhain survived hidden within the prayers of All Hallows Eve, wrapped in the sound of bells and the scent of smoke. It endured in the laughter of children, in the glow of candles on windowsills, in the hush of those who still believed the dead listened when their names were spoken. Over time, the two worlds, pagan and Christian, wove together so tightly that one could hardly tell where one ended and the other began. Fire and faith, myth and scripture, ancestor and saint, all shared the same sky. By the end of the Middle Ages, All Hallows Eve had become a night of mystery and mischief. The church's prayers, mixed with whispers of ghosts and fairies, the boundaries between the sacred and the forbidden blurred once more, just as they had in the days of the Druids. And though the centuries would carry the celebration far from its roots, the essence remained unchanged, a night of remembrance, of masks and firelight, of fear and fascination. A night when the living reached out to the dead, and the dead, perhaps, reached back. By the 1800s, the flickering bonfires of ancient Ireland had become quiet hearths in village homes. Samhain had been softened by centuries of Christianity, reshaped into All Hallows Eve, a night of prayer, memory, and small mischief. Yet beneath the hymns and holy candles, the old spirit still lived, waiting. And when millions of Irish and Scottish immigrants crossed the Atlantic to America, they carried that spirit with them, tucked inside stories, customs, and half-remembered songs. They came not in celebration, but in hardship. The Great Famine of the 1840s drove families from their homeland, leaving behind graves, empty fields, and centuries of history. Uncrowded ships, amid loss and hope. They carried something intangible, their festivals, their humor, and their belief that the veil between worlds thinned each autumn. When they stepped onto the docks of Boston and New York, they brought with them the ghost of Samhain. America was vast, wild, and unfamiliar, but as the leaves turned to red and gold each year, the old instincts stirred. The Irish lit candles in windows for departed souls. They carved faces into turnips and beets, placing them outside to scare away wandering spirits. The eerie glow of those faces mirrored ancient customs, remnant of the Celtic practice of carrying protective light into the darkness. Soon, the American landscape began to shape the tradition anew. Turnips were hard to carve, but pumpkins native to the New World were plentiful and soft. The first jack-o'-lanterns were born from this union of old superstition and new soil. Their toothy grins glowed on porches and fence posts, keeping alive a ritual that was already thousands of years old. The tale of Stingy Jack, an old Irish legend, followed them across the sea. Jack was a trickster who cheated the devil and was doomed to wander the earth forever, carrying a hollowed-out turnip with a burning coal inside. In America, his lantern became the symbol of Halloween, the restless soul, the light in the dark, the reminder that mischief and mortality walk hand in hand. Over time, the festival spread beyond the Irish and Scottish communities. Children in the growing cities began playing pranks on neighbors, knocking on doors, or singing for small treats. The echoes of souling and guising returned only now. The songs were laughter, and the offerings were sweets. The old customs were changing, yet their bones were still ancient. By the late 1800s, newspapers across America mentioned Halloween as a night of revelry. Communities began organizing parties, parades, and games. Apples were floated in bowls for bobbing, a tradition straight from Celtic divination rituals. Candles were placed in carved pumpkins, their warm light reflecting the fire festivals of long ago. Even the imagery ghosts, witches, black cats, and skeletons carried whispers of Samhain's beliefs about the returning dead and the unseen world. Halloween was becoming something uniquely American, a blend of Irish folklore, English customs, Native American harvest celebrations, and new urban creativity. What began as a sacred night of spirit and silence transformed into a festival of laughter, masks, and imagination. Yet beneath the merriment, the core truth remained the same. It was still the night when we honor what lies beyond the veil. In small towns, children dressed as ghosts and goblins roamed from door to door, shouting, "Trick or treat!" In cities, neighbors decorated windows with candles and paper lanterns. Pumpkins glowed like tiny suns on porches. Music and laughter replaced fear. But something ancient still stirred in the air, that same pulse that once beat in the fires of Samhain. For many immigrants, Halloween was more than fun. It was memory. It was a way of carrying home across an ocean, of keeping connection with ancestors and with the land they'd left behind. When the night grew quiet, perhaps an old woman in a Boston tenement whispered a blessing in Gaelic, or a father told his children the tale of the fair folk who walk unseen. The old ways were fading, but they were not forgotten. And so, as the centuries turned, America transformed Halloween into a mirror of itself, playful, creative, a little haunted, and deeply human. The jack-o'-lanterns became brighter, the costumes became wilder, but deep in the heart of every glowing pumpkin and every candlelit window still lived the same idea. The Celts once knew that once a year, under the falling leaves and dark sky, the past and the present meet, and we remember that life and death are only two sides of the same eternal story. The world of Halloween today glows with neon light and laughter. Streets shimmer with decorations, doorsteps overflow with pumpkins, and millions of children march through the night dressed as ghosts, superheroes, or creatures of pure imagination. Yet if you look closely, beyond the masks and music, beyond the candy and chaos, you can still see the faint outline of something older. The ancient pulse of Samhain still beats beneath the glitter and glow. By the early 20th century, Halloween had become a fixture of American life. In towns across the country, schools held harvest festivals, families hosted costume parties, and local papers printed safety tips for trips. The meaning had shifted, no longer a sacred night of spirits, but a community celebration of mischief and creativity. Still, the bones of the ancient ritual remained. The firelight, the disguises, the offerings at the door. As the century unfolded, Halloween transformed once again, this time into a spectacle of imagination. The rise of cinema gave it new life. Horror movies brought back the ghosts and witches of Celtic legend, now flickering across silver screens instead of bonfires. Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Mummy, modern myths, born from ancient fears, filled theaters and living rooms alike. What the Celts once called the otherworld now lived in Hollywood shadows. By the 1950s, the post-war generation turned Halloween into something brighter. Suburban streets echoed with laughter as children ran door to door, their paper masks rustling in the autumn wind. Television specials and cartoons painted the night with humor and innocence. Pumpkins smiled, skeletons danced, fear softened into fun. Yet, under the playfulness, the tradition still carried its old purpose to face what frightens us, to log at it, and in doing so, to master it. Halloween became a mirror of the times. In the 1970s, it grew darker again, a decade fascinated by horror, the occult, and mystery. Movie screens flickered with shadows, and the idea of the haunted house returned. Costume shops exploded with color and imagination. Every generation remade Halloween in its own image, just as the Goots had done, just as the church had done centuries before. It adapted, survived, and evolved, just like the people who celebrated it. And then came the commercialization. By the 21st century, Halloween had become a billion-dollar industry. Plastic pumpkins replaced carved turnips. Candy filled supermarket aisles months in advance. Theme parks built haunted attractions that drew millions. Costumes became elaborate, creative, and sometimes absurd. The line between ancient reverence and modern entertainment blurred completely. Yet for all its glitter and marketing, Halloween still holds something sacred, something the modern world cannot fully explain. Why do people, even now, feel the thrill of the dark? Why do children love pretending to be monsters? Why does the image of a flickering candle and a hollowed pumpkin still feel strangely comforting? Perhaps because, deep down, we still understand what our ancestors knew, that darkness is not the enemy. It's the other half of the light. Halloween has become a stage for the collective imagination. It allows us to wear our fears, to laugh at death, to honor what we've lost, and to celebrate being alive all at once. It's a night of masks, but also of truth. Behind every disguise lies a human longing to connect with the unseen, to dance with the mysteries that never fade. And though its modern form is covered in candy wrappers and neon paint, Halloween remains what it always was, a night of transformation, a night when the living play with shadows, when laughter replaces fear, and when, if only for a moment, we remember that the line between this world and the next is thin as candlelight. The old gods have never truly gone. They merely waited in the corners of memory, in the whisper of the wind, in the turning of the seasons. And now, in the quiet corners of the modern world, they are being remembered once more. Samhain, the festival that once marked the Celtic New Year, is alive again, not in distant ruins or forgotten hills, but in the hearts of those who seek connection to the rhythms of the earth. Today, in forests, meadows, and candlelit living rooms, people gather on the night of October 31st to honor Samhain, much as their ancestors once did. They light bonfires or small altar candles, not as superstition, but as a gesture of remembrance for loved ones lost, for the cycles of nature, for the unseen threads that bind all life. The old rituals have returned, softened by time, yet still carrying their original purpose: to pause, to reflect, and to honor both the living and the dead. Modern pagans, druids, and Wiccans celebrate Samhain as one of the 8 Sabbats, the great spokes on the wheel of the year. They see it not as a day of fear, but as a sacred time to listen, to remember that every leaf that falls, every shadow that lengthens, carries meaning. The fire still burns, though smaller now, flickering in bowls and hearths instead of mountaintops, but its light still bridges worlds. Many create ancestor altars, placing photographs, letters, or heirlooms beside candles and autumn flowers. Others hold silent vigils, meditating on the passage of time and the lessons of loss. Some write down what they wish to release: old habits, sorrows, fears, and burn the paper in the flame, watching the smoke rise like a prayer. The same spirit that once guided druids now whispers in these small, personal acts of transformation. There's a deep comfort in knowing that thousands of years later, we still feel the need to gather in the dark and light a fire. In a world of constant noise and motion, Samhain offers a moment to stop, to face impermanence with courage. It reminds us that endings are not failures, but essential parts of life's rhythm. That mourning and gratitude can coexist. That death is not the opposite of life, but its mirror. Even those who don't call themselves pagans sense this. When people light candles in windows for those they miss, when they visit graves and speak names aloud, when they dress up and laugh at fear, they are continuing the same ancient conversation. The language has changed, but the message has not. We are still trying to understand the mystery of being alive in a world that always turns toward death and yet always renews itself. Samhain, in its modern form, has become a bridge between the spiritual and the personal. It invites reflection without dogma, reverence without fear. It teaches us that darkness is fertile, not empty, that even in silence, something sacred grows. And perhaps, on this night, when the veil thins once again, the ancestors smile to see that the flame they once kindled still burns smaller. Yes, but steady and bright, carried forward by hands that remember, even if they do not know why. As the last candles burn low and the laughter fades into silence, Halloween or Samhain returns to what it has always been. A mirror. A mirror held up to life itself. For beneath the masks and the noise, this night has always whispered the same truth, that everything changes, everything ends, and everything begins again. The Celts knew it. The Druids who lit their sacred fires understood that the darkness was not a punishment, but a passage. The farmers who harvested their final crops before winter knew that letting go was part of living. Even the Christians who reshaped the festival into All Hallows Eve carried that same intuition, that the living and the dead are not separated by walls, but by a veil thin as breath. Today, we might not speak of spirits or fairies, but we still feel it. The chill in the October air, the sound of leaves crunching underfoot, the way the moonlight touches the earth differently this time of year. All of it stirs something ancient inside us, something that remembers. Every generation has remade Halloween in its own image, but its heart has never changed. It remains a night when we flirt with fear, when we play with the shadows that follow us. We wear masks, not just to hide, but to explore it, to become for a moment what we fear or desire most. It's an instinct as old as firelight, to face what haunts us, and in doing so, to disarm it. But beyond the laughter and the costumes, Halloween or Samhain carries a gentler message too. It teaches us to remember those who came before us, to honor their stories, to speak their names so they are never lost to time. It reminds us that we, too, will one day be memories flickering in the minds of others, and that this is not sad, but beautiful. For life and death are not opposites. They are dance partners, turning endlessly around one another, shaping everything we know. Without endings, there could be no beginnings. Without night, no dawn. So when you light a candle this Halloween, pause for a moment. Watch the flame bend and breathe. Think of all the hands that have done the same, from the Druids of old to your own. You are part of that same unbroken line, stretching back through the centuries. And as the light trembles in the dark, know this: Samhain has never truly ended. It lives in every spark that pushes back the night, in every laugh that defies fear, in every soul that remembers. The fire still burns, quietly, steadily, eternally, reminding us that though all things must fade, nothing is ever truly lost.